Great. So we're going to go from 1:30 till about 3:30, and then we'll take another break, and then finish up the afternoon session before we start drinks and dinner. So the next speaker I'm thrilled to have here is Jane McGonigal. She's a world-renowned designer of alternate reality games, or as she says, games that are designed to improve real lives and solve real problems. She's a New York Times bestselling author of Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. And she currently serves as the Chief Creative Officer for Super Better Labs. So please welcome her.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm a little bit different than most of you. I'm not a CEO. I'm a CCO, but still grappling with big startup questions, just like you. I am here today to share with you some good news. This is the good news. As of a few months ago, humanity has reached a critical milestone. We now have 1 billion gamers on the planet. Yes, a couple in the room at least. That's great. That's the first time anyone's applauded when I shared that statistic. So now I feel like I'm at home. That's 1 billion people who spend at least an hour a day playing games. And they're not necessarily who you might think they are. 40% are girls and women. 1 in 4 is 50 years old or older. So the old stereotypes about who is gaming is definitely dead. What's interesting about this stat is this is something I do in my spare time. I'm a little bit of a data geek, and I track all the different markets around the world. And just 2 years ago, this number was only at 500 million. So we've doubled in 2 years. I don't know if there's a secret Moore's law about to come into fruition there or not. I think one of the reasons we know is the proliferation of social network games and mobile gaming devices, making it easier for more people to play. I also just happen to think, this is just my personal guess, that more people are willing to admit that they're gamers now than they were 2 years ago. So I think that's one reason why we've seen such a big leap. Now, you might be wondering why I think it's good news that we've reached 1 billion gamers. The reason why I think it's good news is that my area of research, I have a PhD, and my focus of my research is on how games are changing how we think and act in real life, particularly how we tackle difficult challenges, how we problem solve together. And the research strongly suggests that games are making us stronger in some very interesting ways. So that's what I'm here to talk about. In fact, games are making us so much stronger that I often find myself lying awake at night, pondering this question, which sounds a little silly when you say it out loud, but I'll say it anyway. Do gamers have superpowers? And I don't mean Avengers-style superpowers like smashing in sight or leaping over tall buildings in a single bound. I mean a little bit more of a scientific definition of superpower. That we use at the Institute for the Future. Superpower is a skill that so far surpasses any previously demonstrated skill that it effectively changes our notion of what is humanly possible. And if you think about the long course of human history, there have been plenty of superpowers. Obviously, the invention of language and then written language. The invention of cities so that we could live together in larger numbers and do more extraordinary things. The invention of agriculture so that we could live together in larger groups to feed each other. The invention of roads to connect the cities so that we could collaborate across locations. More recently, of course, the internet has been our greatest superpower. If you look at all the different superpowers, what's common, is my audio going in and out, by the way? Is there anything I can do about that? I'm going to try and... We might switch to a handheld if necessary. Okay. No. My superpower is not projecting my audio, apparently. Would it be better to switch to a handheld, maybe? Am I good? I'm good. Okay, great. Thank you. So what these superpowers have in common is that they have to do with coming together in larger groups, enabling us to be more collaborative, to be more collective, and to sort of tackle things at a more ambitious scale, right? So it seems that games might be that next great platform for extreme scale collaboration. So you want to think about extreme scale groups and networks, this is probably the biggest one we have right now, anywhere. I mean, bigger than Facebook. There have been 1 billion downloads of Angry Birds games as of, I think, just a week or so ago. They hit this number. And they estimate that 1.4 billion people have played these 1 billion downloads. Now, what's interesting about this is that you don't buy an Angry Birds game. You have to download it. So these are all people playing on connected devices that the company that makes Angry Birds, Rovio, can reach. If you talk to their CEO, he'll tell you that the most exciting thing about Angry Birds is that they can reach 1.4 billion people in a single message. This is the largest group of people that have opted into a network, paying attention and engaging anywhere on the planet. It's really extraordinary. I mean, just imagine if you could ask one question of all of these 1.4 billion people and the incredible diversity of those people. It's really quite an extraordinary network. And in terms of time and engagement, it's quite a commitment they're making. So far, we spent 250,000 years avenging these birds and the horrible pigs that stole their eggs. That's 300 million minutes a day. And maybe Angry Birds isn't really your thing. I see a few of you look more like hardcore gamers. So you think about something like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3, which made $1 billion in its first 10 days. I mean, the economic scale is staggering. But we know that the average player of this game is spending 170 hours per year playing this one game. So that's 1 month of full-time work every single year that every Call of Duty player is spending playing this game. It's an incredible investment of time. They're playing it like it's their job. And you might wonder, why is it that we play games like it's our job? I mean, you sort of look for research to understand this. Here's one statistic that I think is relevant. Gallup did a massive study and found out that 71% of U.S. workers are actively disengaged at the workplace. So in their real jobs, they show up, and what they mean by actively disengaged is they mean that they don't have a sense of purpose or meaning in what they're doing. The job does not give them pleasure or joy. They have no curiosity about the work that they're doing, 71%. And they've estimated that this costs U.S. companies $300 billion annually in lost productivity, which is staggering. And that's just productivity costs. So you can imagine the cost of innovation when people are showing up and they just don't care about the work that they're doing. It's staggering, which is why you see so many companies now, particularly in the enterprise software space, are really looking at this trend called gamification, which is not a term that I use. I use the term gameful design instead, but you can use any term you want. It's really the idea of bringing game mechanics and game emotions and game styles of collaboration and problem solving into the workplace. So they're trying to bring some of the ways that games really light us up and engage us into real problem solving and into real work. And I wanted to share with you today just some of the really high level findings that we know about how games work. Now, I will admit that this talk might be more useful to you in the short term for understanding your kids or maybe your nephews or nieces than for understanding your business, because I know that you aren't necessarily engaged in game design. For the long term, though, understanding how games work and who games are helping us become might be very useful in terms of everything from forecasting the future to crowdsourcing product design to engaging customers. So let me tell you the number one thing I think it's important to know about games. It's that games activate 10 positive emotions. This is probably the most important finding to come out of the game industry, I think, in the past few years. The top 10 positive emotions that games provoke when we're playing our favorite games. And it's been shown through a variety of scientific studies that we can provoke these positive emotions by playing a game that we enjoy in any context, no matter high stress. We look at kids about to go into surgery can provoke these emotions. People going through incredibly stressful divorce can provoke these emotions. Soldiers serving in the theater of war can provoke these positive emotions when they're playing a game. So their joy, relief. Number 8 is interesting if you're used to thinking of games as violent or really like ruthlessly competitive. They bring out the worst in us. But as Ben Gordon said this morning, co-op is outperforming competitive 3-1. Most of the time, we're helping the people we play with. We're building up bonds and trust. The 7th emotion is surprise. 6, of course, is pride. We're getting better. We're accomplishing something. 5 is curiosity. 4 is excitement. 3rd is awe and wonder. The second is contentment. We're just happy with what we're doing. And the number one emotion that we provoke when we play games is creativity. And this is really interesting because it's not just a sort of abstract notion of creativity, of I feel very artistic, I feel like, I feel like a creator. The kind of creativity that we provoke is creative agency, which is the sense that we can try something that we haven't tried before. And we can think of something that maybe no one's ever thought of before, and we can experiment, and we can see the results of our experimentations. I mean, something very similar to what we do with startups, this idea that we will iterate and fail quickly and learn and try again and improve and get closer to our target. So those are the emotions that games provoke. And what I want to share with you now is a range of scientific research looking at how these 10 positive emotions are changing the way we think and act in real life. The thing is, these positive emotions are very powerful. They work at the neurological level. And the average young person now has spent 10,000 hours by the age of 21 playing games, provoking these emotions, and it's changing the way we really think in real life. So one of the findings that I think is quite interesting came out of Michigan State University last year. They found that kids who play more video games score higher on tests of creativity, particularly the Torrance test of creativity, which involves storytelling and drawing. This test has been shown, it's been used for more than 50 years. It's been shown over a 40-year time span to accurately predict career success. Will you be seen as an innovator in your field? Will you be recognized for your creativity in your profession later in life? And kids today who spend more time playing video games score 23% higher on this test. Now, one reason why I think that's so interesting is if you look at the top 10 positive emotions that gamers say they feel when they play their favorite games, creativity is number one. We start to see from scientific research, maybe it's not just a feeling of creativity, but they actually are increasing their creative capacities. Another thing we know from research is that gamers are spending 80% of the time failing. So they only succeed 1 in every 5 tries. Now, in real life, when we do this, usually we take it as a sign that we should be doing something else. We would find some other way to spend our free time. It's quite interesting that in games, which are something we choose to do for fun and for pleasure, we are signing up to fail 80% of the time. Why is this? Why is it that games bring out this kind of resilience where we will stick with the challenge and not give up? We'll talk about why that is in a minute. Now, Nature Journal, the most prestigious scientific journal, recently ran a roundup of neuroscience research from gaming. I just want to share with you a few of the highlights, a few of the most interesting findings. One is they're finding that ADHD or ADD symptoms disappear in both kids when they're playing one of their favorite games. So they're able to stay on task. They're able to set a goal and then follow through until they complete the goal, even if it takes hours, days, or even weeks. And these are abilities that they don't always show at the real workplace or in the classroom. And suddenly we have this generation of young people who have been given a diagnosis of a disability that goes away completely when they play their favorite games. There's something about their mental focus that comes into play with games. We know that social gamers are more likely to help others. They spend 3 times as much energy and effort helping people that they play games with in real life. So think about social games, games like Farmville, where you actually have to help one of your neighbors, or Words with Friends, where you're playing back and forth throughout the course of the day, developing your social relationship. These gamers spend 3 times as much time reaching out in real life to help people they played a game with. And it works the other way too. A study at Brigham Young University School of Family Life showed that kids are more likely to come to their parents and ask for help with a real-world problem if the parents are regularly playing video games with the kids. That study was super interesting because the researchers were kind of setting out to show that gaming was bad for your family relationships, and they had to kind of issue a 180-degree about-face when they saw what the positive benefits were. We're also seeing that gamers with autism show increased social intelligence when they're playing games with other people, multiplayer games. Particularly, they're better able to understand the motivations of other people, and they're better able to communicate about what they're trying to do, what their intentions are. So this kind of increased capacity to collaborate and communicate within the game environment. The last finding I want to share with you before we sort of talk about why this is happening is in clinical trials. There have been 2 clinical trials so far in the last 2 years that have shown that casual games outperform pharmaceuticals for both clinical anxiety and clinical depression. This is something we're going to see a lot about in the next few years. Many people that I work with now foresee a future not that far off where games are the sort of first go-to treatment before you go to medication or before you go to therapy. In fact, our company is involved in some controlled studies now to demonstrate that possibility. So why is all of this happening? It appears that games are really well designed to draw out our natural resilience. So resilience means getting stronger in the face of a challenge rather than getting stressed out or burnt out. And it seems that the psychology at the core of this has to do with a concept called eustress, or positive stress. When we think about stress, we usually mean the negative kind. Somebody else wants us to do something and we feel angry or frustrated or anxious. And we have all these sort of biophysical reactions to that. Our adrenaline goes up, our cortisol goes up, our heart rate goes up, breathing rate quickens, blood flow patterns change so that we have this really sharp focused attention so that we can deal with this threat. We don't like that feeling. That's negative stress. It goes like this. But when we choose to tackle a challenge, when we have opted into the challenge, which is what happens when we play a game, right? Games are voluntary. Games are self... are we having mic problems again?
Yes, we are. Sorry.
Okay. You going to turn this one off?
Yes.
Okay. Double mic. Ooh. So when we play a game, we opt into the challenge, and this gives us a sense of positive stress. All the same physiological things happen. Heart rate goes up, adrenaline, breathing rate, the blood flow patterns change in our brain, but instead of experiencing it as anxiety and frustration, that negative stress, we experience it as motivation, as drive, as exhilaration, as ambition. The only thing that's changed is whether we feel in control of the situation. And it turns out that if you can move somebody from a state of negative stress to positive stress, that has all sorts of benefits. You become more optimistic and energized, so you set higher ambitions for yourself. You raise the bar for yourself. And other people are more likely to help you. They're drawn to you because your energy that you're putting out is ambition and excitement, not stressed and angry and frustrated. So eustress is like a perfect storm for success, and it allows us to have high levels of cortisol, which we associate with stress, but have positive benefits physiologically and mentally instead of getting sort of burnt out. Now, I can talk about this a lot, but it's one way to break it down is kind of into the 4 areas of resilience that we're seeing. The blissful productivity is really that mental focus, the ability to stay on task. It's kind of a kind of mental resilience. The social fabric is the social resilience, the ability to better draw allies into our plans, better ability to communicate or collaborate. We have this sort of emotional resilience that I like to talk about as urgent optimism. So it's that ability to provoke the feelings like awe and wonder and excitement and love and curiosity that drive us to keep going even when things are tough. And then epic meaning is sort of like a spiritual resilience, that connection to something bigger than ourselves. And we often get that from a heroic story, from the sense that we're on a mission that has meaning, right? Or maybe it's from being a part of a massively multiplayer community. We're connected to a community bigger than ourselves. But it really helps us rise to the heroic occasion. We know if people have a strong sense of meaning and purpose, that they're much more likely to hang in there with a difficult task and not give up. So this is what eustress, or positive stress, or resilience in gaming looks like. This is a series of photographs taken of gamers while they're playing their favorite games. So just to show you, what does that resilience look like? What does that eustress look like? You can kind of see here he's relishing the challenge. You can see here that eustress, resilience, it looks like this kind of fierce determination. Sometimes it looks like this, or really have to persevere, right? Sometimes we think of games as being this kind of lazy activity, but you look at these faces and you see it's not really a lot of laziness going on. Sometimes it looks like this, where we really just sort of bliss out. We can stay gaming for hours and hours because we feel like we're in flow, that our ability is right there with the challenge. Sometimes it looks like this. I like this guy because if you didn't know he was gaming, you would probably be worried about him with the nostrils flaring and the pupils dilating and everything. But what's great is when we're failing 80% of the time, and you know he's about to fail. I mean, look at that's not going well. But you know that if he fails, 4 times and keeps learning and keeps trying, that he's probably going to get to that epic win that all gamers aspire to. So I think this is kind of like the after picture. The first guy is the before picture. This is the after picture, where we really surprise ourselves with what we're capable of. So at the Institute for the Future, where I do a lot of my research, we talk about resilient individuals as super super empowered, hopeful individuals, people who are more willing to stick in there with a difficult challenge, who feel like they have agency, and who bring all of their positive emotions and social connections to bear on a problem. And what I want to talk to you about now is research that just came out in the past month that's starting to show us at the neurological level what super empowered, hopeful individuals look like. So this is a game called Remission. It was created by a group called Hope Labs, based here in the Bay Area, and it was created for young people with cancer. And the game is based on the idea of chemotherapy and how it works, and you see what's going on here. You kind of learn about chemotherapy with your chemotherapy weapons, and you're destroying the cancer. So what they found that this game did is that it actually improved outcomes for the children who were trying to beat cancer, that particularly two things. They had much better adherence to chemotherapy. So with a lot of the cancers, you're looking at 2 to 3 years of oral chemotherapy, and if you can take every dose for 3 years, you have a much higher probability of beating the disease. And these individuals had much greater adherence, even if they'd only played the game for a total of 2 hours over the course of 1 month. For 3 years, it changed their behavior in taking their chemotherapy drugs. The chemotherapy drugs have a lot of side effects, so most kids miss many doses. They also had a psychological shift. They had higher rates of what we call self-efficacy. So that's feeling like you can do something to make a difference, that you can take an action that could possibly have a positive outcome. Now, the researchers at Hope Lab were really excited about this, but they wanted to understand why. How could playing a game for 2 hours change your real-world behavior for 3 years and do something as significant as help you beat cancer? I mean, games are supposed to be trivial. How is it that a game for 2 hours could help us beat cancer? So they did a new study where they put gamers in fMRI machines, and they actually looked at the neural activity while they were playing this game, while they were playing Remission. So that's the video of the gameplay. Now, what they did is they compared people playing the game, which you see here, the areas are all lit up, with people in the fMRI machines who were just watching the game. So this is really interesting. The impact, you can see here, nothing's going on that side. They're watching the game, they're seeing all the graphics and the cool, the cool stuff, but they're not playing. The neural activity only comes when you have agency in the game. And they found that there were 2 regions of the brain that were significantly more lit up for the person playing the game. The first was this sort of reward stratum, the caudate and the thalamus. We associate this with drive, with motivation. The more neural activity you have here, the more likely you are to stay focused on a goal and to not give up, to really try and get what you want. They found this area did not light up when the player was successful in the game or when they got goodies, like, oh, you leveled up or you earned a new weapon or you got that loot that you wanted. It lit up when they were anticipating the game's reaction to something that they tried. So the rewarding part of the game was feeling agency, that curiosity and expectation. I just tried this. Will it work? And it was actually more lit up in moments of failure in many cases. And that's a very interesting thing to know. They were lit up by failure, we theorize, because they're learning and they're able to try again. We know that reward circuitry has to do with anticipation, not actually getting what you want. So they were very motivated to keep trying, even in the face of failure. And then the hippocampus was lit up, which we associate with learning and memory. And so I've talked with the researchers to try to understand what this is. And the best hypothesis that we have is that they're committing to long-term memory this feeling of agency, this feeling of motivation. So it's not something that you just experience and forget. This is actually becoming a part of who they are. It's actually changing their long-term perception, the sense of agency and willingness to try even when it's hard. So this is the brain of a super empowered, hopeful individual. And we have 1 billion people on the planet who are training their brains to think in this way. This is why I think it's good news that we have 1 billion gamers. So the last thing I want to share with you is what I'm doing to try to take advantage of these 1 billion people with their super empowered brains. I actually had a traumatic brain injury 2 years ago. And it was quite a devastating experience. I couldn't read or write for a few months, constant headaches and nausea, all the terrible things that go along with traumatic brain injury. And during that time, I actually wound up making a game to help myself get through it. As a game designer, I wanted to try to super empower myself. And now I have a startup company called Super Better Labs, where we've taken this game that I use just for my concussion and post-concussion syndrome, and we're now using it with people to treat everything from depression, anxiety, and cancer to more positive goals like losing weight, quitting smoking, or reducing stress. We just launched the online sort of sneak preview 8 weeks ago. Our real product you see here is the mobile app, of course, but we wanted to test it a little bit first. So 8 weeks ago, we launched this. We've had about 25,000 players so far, and I just wanted to share with you a sneak preview of what we're seeing, because it really speaks to mission. So one thing that we've learned is that people are coming to us after struggling for years. So 40% of the players, these 25,000 players who've signed up, have been struggling with the challenge that they're playing for more than 5 years. And 70% have been struggling with it for at least 1 year. So talk about making a product that the world wants. We're trying to serve people who have had a problem they haven't been able to solve for more than 5 years. These are the challenges. I don't know if you can, how well you can see them. Losing weight and getting fit and working out comprise half of them. So these are more positive goals, as well as things like depression, anxiety, and chronic pain. Now, the last little bit of data that I want to share with you that I find particularly interesting is that this is the top challenge breakdown for users who've signed in 7+ times. So they're really playing the game. They've stuck with it. They didn't just come once and then quit. And what we found is that there was a significant overrepresentation of players with depression, anxiety, and stress reduction who were sticking with the game. So double what we would expect to see based on signups. To me, this is really interesting looking at the research that we've seen on games, that it's better than pharmaceuticals for clinical anxiety, depression, that it allows us to fail and keep trying and motivate these positive emotions. We've also seen very low drop-off for losing weight and getting fit, which is interesting because maybe these people who've struggling for 5 years are starting to feel more agency and feel more self-efficacy. So that's just one thing that you can do with these 1 billion brains that have been now super wired to feel agency and to work harder in the face of a challenge. And I hope that in the future you all have an opportunity to take advantage of this new superpower, whether it's through your team members or through working with your customers. Thank you very much.
Are all games created equal? I mean, you talk about games
Yeah.
broadly, and
Yeah.
clearly Angry Birds is different than a more social game, right? That
Yeah.
is something, and so I'd be curious to hear your take of, how do you differentiate certain
Sure.
games from others?
Yeah, different games have different benefits, and some have more than others. There's a bit in my book called Practical Advice for Gamers or Parents of Gamers, so I'll just distill for you a few of the principles. One is that social or multiplayer is typically better than single player, so I recommend that you play the multiplayer or social at least half of the time. Co-op is generally better than competitive, so you should try and play co-op whenever that mode's available. Creative games where you're actually building systems or doing system design, games like Minecraft, are actually really interesting for the kind of creative resilience that they develop. So that seems to be a particularly useful kind of game to play. But even a game like Angry Birds is really interesting because we've seen from research also at Stanford that playing a quick game that you're successful at can boost your confidence and actual success for 24 hours afterwards. So you can play a game like Angry Birds for, a few minutes before a meeting or a presentation or a first date and get some of these boosts. The positive emotions linger. So every game can potentially fit into the sort of ecosystem of making us stronger.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.